As a high school student, you should be comfortable, for the most part, working with fractions. This video will go through some basic operations with fractions, including talking about improper fractions, mixed numbers, how to convert back and forth between the two, how to multiply fractions, and how to add fractions. First, let's talk about improper and mixed numbers. An improper fraction is when the top number is larger than the bottom number. Many times you'll need to leave the fraction as is, or sometimes you'll have to rewrite it in mixed number form. A lot of people have a basic understanding of how fractions work and know that 7/6, which is what this fraction is called, is the same as taking 6/6 plus an extra 1/6. So most of us would know then that that would be 7/6. 6/6 is the same as a 1, right? 6 things out of itself makes one whole, plus the 1/6 would turn that into 1 and 1/6. But not all fractions are that easy for us to think about and do this way. So there's kind of a shortcut that most people use to turn improper fractions into mixed numbers. For example, if we continue with our 7/6 example, we say, how many times does 6 go into 7? So it's almost like we change the problem into division. You know that 6 goes into 7 one time, so that's going to be our big number out front. Any leftovers from doing that division are going to be the top number. So 6 goes into 7 one time, and then there's 1 left over that goes on the top, and then our bottom number stays the same. So let's try that with a few other practice questions. Let's try that method again. Let's say we have 12/7. So 12 on the top, 7 on the bottom. Using that same method, we're going to say how many times does 7 go into 12? And we know that it goes in one time. And how many is left over when we do that? 7 goes into 12 once, and then there are 5 left over. So we say 5 on the top, and then we keep the bottom number the same, 7. Let's try it one more time just to make sure you've got it. How about 16/7? This time, when you say how many times does 7 go into 16, you'd say that it goes in twice, because 2 times 7 is 14. Since 2 times 7 is 14, that means there's 2 left over to try to get to 16, and so that's going to go on the top of our fraction. We keep the bottom number the same, and we say 2/7. So if you want to reverse this process now and take these mixed numbers and turn them into improper fractions, you simply reverse the process. Let's take the number 2 and 2/7. To turn that into an improper fraction, you would say 7 times 2, and that's going to be a number that you'll hold in your mind. So in this case, 7 times 2 is 14. And then you'll take the answer that you got from your multiplication and add the top number. So in this case, we'd say that 7 times 2 is 14, plus 2 is 16. So we get 16 on the top, and then we again keep the bottom number the same. Let's make sure that that method works with our previous one as well. If we have 1 and 5/7, the first thing we should do is multiply 1 times 7, which is 7, and then we're going to add the top number to that. 1 times 7 is 7, plus 5 is 12, and the bottom number stays the same. The next topic that we're going to cover is multiplication of fractions. Multiplication of fractions is very easy. All you have to do is multiply straight across. Now let's not confuse that with cross multiplication. If you're doing a problem like 1/2 times 3/4, you do not cross multiply like some of you might be thinking. That is not the method you should use. Cross multiplication is used for proportions, which is in a different lesson. For multiplication of fractions, first of all, try to use the dot instead of the x so that it doesn't confuse the issue for you further. Then you're going to multiply straight across. So the 1 and the 3 get multiplied together, and the 2 and the 4 get multiplied together. So on the top, 1 times 3 is 3, and on the bottom, 2 times 4 is 8. Let's try it one more time with a problem like 2/5 times 3/8. Again, if you multiply straight across, the 2 and the 3 get multiplied together, and on the bottom, the 5 and the 8 get multiplied together. So now when you multiply, here you'll get 2 times 3 is 6. On the bottom, 5 times 8 is 40. One thing you should always keep in mind when working with fractions is that you need to make sure that it is reduced to lowest terms. Reducing fractions to lowest terms is not a lesson that I'm going to be making a video about. It's something that I'll just keep reviewing and hammering home to you throughout the school year and throughout all of our videos. When you're reducing a fraction, you simply try to find a common factor of both the top and the bottom numbers. When they're both even, 2 is an easy number to work with. Most people can divide things in half pretty easily in their heads. So let's do that with this problem. 2 goes into 6 3 times, and 2 goes into 40 20 times. So that is the reduced form of this fraction. Whenever you're working with fractions, always put your answer in lowest terms. Let's do one more problem that involves an improper fraction that you need to multiply. What about a problem like 1 1/5 times 3/4? You wouldn't want to apply the same principle here of multiplying straight across. You'd want to turn this mixed number into an improper fraction first. So using our method from before, we say 1 times 5 is 5, plus 1 is 6. So really the problem that we're going to do is 6/5 times 3/4. When you multiply straight across, you're going to get 18 on top and 20 on the bottom. Again, to help us practice our reducing, these numbers are both even, so let's divide them in half. When you divide both in half, you're going to get 9 and 10. Now the numbers cannot be reduced any further, so we can quit. 9/10 is our final answer. The last topic that we're going to cover in this video is on addition of fractions. When you add fractions, you need to make sure that the bottom number is the same in both fractions. It's called making sure that the problem has a common denominator. So let's write that down so that you can see it. Common denominator. And that denominator, again, is the bottom number. So let's take an easy problem like 1/2 plus 3/4. The bottom numbers, or the denominators in this case, are not the same, so you want those numbers to change somehow. Usually it's easier to see if one goes into the other, and in this case it does. 2 does go into 4, so all we need to change is this first fraction. We need to change it so that it has a 4 on the bottom instead of a 2. So we want to think of some factors of 2 that make it go into 4. So if we do 2 times 2, it'll turn into a 4. So what I'm going to do is multiply that bottom number by a 2. Now I can't just arbitrarily change numbers like that. I have to make sure that what I'm doing is mathematically sound. If I multiply the bottom number by a 2, I have to also multiply the top number by a 2. If you look at this new fraction that I'm introducing, we're really multiplying by the number 1. 2 divided by 2 is simply a 1, and when you multiply by 1, it doesn't change the value of the number. So we're manipulating this to turn it into something that's useful for us, but we're not changing the value of what we're doing. So now when I multiply just these first two fractions together, 2 times 1 is 2. On the bottom, 2 times 2 is 4, and my other fraction stays the same, 3/4. Now when I add fractions, since the bottoms are the same, they are common denominators. Now I go ahead and keep the bottoms the way they are, and I add the tops only. So let's include that in our directions as well. Add the top only. So now when I add, I get 2 plus 3 is 5, and I get 5/4. Depending upon your directions, you may leave it as an improper fraction, or you can use your method from up above and turning it into a mixed number. 4 goes into 5 one time with 1 left over, so we get 1 1/4. Usually if an improper fraction is allowed, you can leave it that way and you're finished. Let's try adding fractions together one more time. Let's try it with 2/5 plus 3/8. This time, neither number goes into each other. So we need to find a number that both 5 and 8 go into. Now you will find it easiest to look for the smallest number that they both go into. In this case, I don't want to find the smallest, I just want to use the number that comes to mind. And 40 works. 40 divides evenly by 5 and also by 8. So I'm going to have to change both fractions so that they have a 40 on the bottom. So on the first fraction, the 2/5, to turn 5 into 40, I'd have to multiply it by an 8. And so if I do that, I need to do the same to the top of that fraction. For the second fraction, to turn that 8 into a 40, I would need to multiply by 5. So I'm going to do that on both the top and the bottom for that fraction. Again, what I'm multiplying by is simply a 1 in both cases. So now I'm going to get two new fractions, both with 40s on the bottom. On the first fraction, the 2/5, that's going to change into a 16 out of 40. On the second fraction, the 3/8, that's going to turn into 15 out of 40. Now I can go ahead and add. The bottom number stays the same. The top numbers get added together. 10 plus 10 is 20, 6 plus 5 is 11, so I'm really doing 11 plus 20, which is 31. Again, you want to make sure that your answer is in lowest terms. In this case, 31 is a prime number, so I know that unless 31 goes into 40 evenly, I am already in lowest terms.